This is Aaron Edwards, Santos Springs. Welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Field Report, South America. There is a lot going on down there, a lot to cover this week. It's a big one for markets. So a couple of the highlights: exchange rate, their currency has just plummeted, really pressuring their prices down there. Second thing is there is a weather scare potentially. There could still be some cut yields on soybeans. We're going to be talking about weather and the developmental phase. Also, the double crop corn, Safrinha corn planting is underway. We're going to talk about progress there and wrap up with some with an image of harvest going on there and a happy farmer with good yield. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We're going to start with the exchange rate because this is probably the headline that is keeping farmers up more than anything in Brazil. So let me grab a marker and we will go from there. Let's see what color is going to work. Let me check that green. There we go. Green should be nice. Okay. So just so you understand what we're looking at here, this is the Brazilian currency divided by the US dollar. So if we go over here to where it's 6.3, this means that 6.3 of the Brazilian currency, it's the real, plural would be reais, is worth $1 US. That's what that means. And then down here, we get, if we round it, it's 520. Oh, I did the comma like they do in Brazil. It's 520 to 1, right? So just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to round numbers because it will make it easier to understand. If we look at this $6 mark here, and then we would go down here to $5. Let me get this out of the way. Go down here to $5. Here, the exchange rate was 6 to 1. Here, it was 5 to 1. Just for the sake of clarity. So it's fallen basically from, cleaning this up. All right. We've seen, if we go back to say November, December of 2024, that got all the way up to 630. And as of current trade, it's dropped below 520. For perspective, if you had soybeans in your bin, so available soybeans, here, this would have been old crop of 2024. If you had stored old crop soybeans 2024, this was worth 140 Brazilian currency, so RS, Brazilian currency, per 60 kilogram sack. That's how they quote it. So this was worth 140. Current quotes are around 105. That stated another way, we all know that the price of soybeans is pressured. It's not good anywhere. Besides being bad on, say, the Board of Trade, their basis takes it down one notch lower because it's harvest and they're coming into harvest and there's a lot of beans. And their exchange rate takes it down even one notch lower than that. So the price of soybeans, just cash market soybeans over the last 14 months has dropped 30 to 40%. Just for the sake of numbers and a mental image, picture that you could have sold $14 beans and now you can sell $10 beans. That's basically what it feels like to farmers in Brazil. And you're saying, welcome to the game. I know it's hard. Prices are low. I'm just saying this is the storyline that is probably bothering farmers in Brazil more than anything else. And it's pressured their soybeans. It's pressured their corn. Now, from a Chicago Board of Trade U.S. farmer standpoint, there may be a positive story here. And basically, there's two ways that this story, this exchange rate story, can be bullish for U.S. prices. I don't really see that happening with what we know today, but these could be bullish stories that do play out. The first way it's bullish is since the dollar is lower, our exports become more competitive. So we could have friendlier soybean exports because we have a lower dollar. That's the first way this could be a bullish story. The second way that this exchange rate could be a bullish story is it could turn the volume down on farmers selling coming out of Brazil. So farmers in Brazil saying, I absolutely cannot turn a profit. Just so you know, where a lot of them would break even, the price in dollars, given the exchange rate, where the exchange rate would have to be for many, if not most of them, to break even, would be between this that was even a little high. I'll do this in blue. If this exchange rate were, depending on the producer, between 590 and about 570, this would be the range. This would be the break-even range for a lot of farmers in Brazil, given the sales that they've made. So current price of soybeans in dollars, if they had an exchange rate between that 570, 590, a lot of them would be close to break even. So one way that it's bullish is the weaker dollar gives us more exports. We got to see if we do get the exports, but it could be bullish. The second way that it could be a bullish story is if farmers in Brazil are just unwilling to sell soybeans, so it actually pulls back some of the harvest selling pressure that we would typically expect out of Brazil, and they figure out some way to not price it or even sell it but buy it back on the board, or it could, turning down selling pressure out of Brazil could also be bullish. The second most important thing, especially in the southern part of South America, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay, is there is a dryness concern. Before we look at the weather charts, I just want to briefly go over developmentally where the crop is. If you've been following along, this isn't going to be much of a surprise. We're just taking it one step at a time. Let me grab red there, but 50.2% of the crop is filling pods, and then 15.4% of the crop is flowering. So these are the two categories that have more weather risk. So basically, 2/3 of Brazil's crop has weather risk. If we think about the order, it goes from it's emerging, then flowering, then filling pods, then maturing, and then over here is where we start seeing harvest. 6.6% of Brazil's crop, soybean crop, is harvested. We're going to look at corn in just a little bit, but we'll see that corn planting and soybean harvest is tracking. We will get roughly between that 20 to 30% soybean harvest. That's roughly the acreage that we'll likely see on double crop corn. Probably about a third of it, actually. We'll get to that later. But the takeaway from this chart is 2/3 of the soybean crop could still have weather risk. Now, this is late season. They're almost out of the woods. This would be like a weather scare in most of the U.S. production country or area, like a late August, late summer weather scare. Man, I thought I was out of the woods. I'd almost ready to, place a wager on my yields, and then bam, rains shut off, and there is weather risk. So let's talk about, number one, which regions are affected and how serious of an issue that could potentially be. The first thing that I want to point out, I'm going to get a marker here. The red should work. The first thing I want to point out is, if you've been tracking, you know that when I talk about South America's production, I divide it basically in two. The northern part, all in Brazil, accounts for about half of total South American corn and soybean production. And then the southern part, which is a combination of Argentina, southern Brazil, Paraguay, and a little bit in Uruguay, that is also roughly half of all of the corn and soybeans produced. And the reason it's interesting is because you have basically two different weather patterns that affect those regions. So southern Brazil is more similar to Paraguay, it's more similar to Argentina even than it is to, say, northern Brazil. So I'm not even showing the maps of northern Brazil because the weather it's basically been perfect all year long. what we're zeroing in on here is that southern part. So let me highlight some of these regions. This is the state of Paraná in Brazil. This is the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Both of those states combined for about 25% of Brazil's total production. Pretty significant. Argentina, this is Argentina. Now, they don't produce way down south, but there's that. The autocorrect there looked wonky. They don't produce way down here in the south, but they do. The production regions of Argentina, they're also experiencing some dryness. And this right here is Paraguay. Paraguay produces about 10 million metric tons, maybe 12 in a good year. And this is Uruguay that also produces. All that's to say, this dry area right here, that is southern Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay. This is a pretty significant South American production region. We're talking, it's not a footer or a detail in the headlines. It's a pretty significant region. It has been dry. This is the 7-day past precipitation, but if you go back to the 14-day, you get some moisture. If you go back like 10 days, it's already been dry. So it's already been dry over a week. So it's already on the dry side. And then as we look at the fork, and it's a big enough region to where it could have impact. And developmentally, they're still filling pods, maybe a little bit's flowering. Mainly it's, kind of filling those pods. So there still could be yield loss in that region. And then as we look forward on a 7-day forecast, we could see, as we look forward on a 7-day forecast, let me just grab the marker here. You could see a lot of that region actually has no rain forecasted. And part of that, after you've been dry for 10 days, this 1/10 of an inch, that doesn't do much good. It helps, but it doesn't do a whole lot. So there absolutely could be a story here. I talked to a farmer let's see where he would be. He farms right here at the cusp of this, where basically there's like there's about an inch forecasted next week. And he was like, if we get those rains, there's not yield loss. But if we don't get those rains, it's going to be a smaller crop. And so the point that I'm trying to make is as we track over the weekend, markets are shut, but weather maps get updated. If this forecast turns wetter, the bullish story gets kind of pushed to the back burner. But if it turns drier at all, there can be a bullish story. It's late in the season. Yield loss wouldn't be expected. Brazil's already, almost 7, probably knocking on 10% harvested by the time we see next week's report. But, remember, there's those early seeded beans that go to double crop corn. This is regular season. These are beans that people count on, and there could be yield loss. There could be a weather story. It's late in the season. It's not impossible. And the weather, I'd say the most likely thing to impact markets, or that could impact markets positively, would be a weather story over the weekend. If it turns slightly drier, or even just reshapes some of these production regions, it could, if it just, this weather pattern, these rains, even if they just move a little bit farther east or northeast, it could already, those are significant regions that need to get rain for them to have full yield. Now we'll go to corn. This is Brazil's corn planting progress, and I'll get, let's go with green here. So historically, we would expect Brazil to be 7.2% planted on double crop corn. By now, they are at 5.9. So it's not a big deal, but what is that? 1.3 percentage points behind. They're tracking a little bit, lagging a little bit behind. Where is this delay coming from? The main delay is, these are the two, Mato Grosso, that's in the north, Paraná, that's the state we were just talking about, that's in the south. Both of the main double crop corn areas are a little bit little bit behind, lagging a little bit. This will be a story we see develop. It's not concerning for anyone. The main thing is that corn in Brazil it's at the lowest prices, I think, in 15 months because of not only was the international price bad, with Chicago being bad, but they're expecting a big crop, and that exchange rate is pressuring it down even more. So it's a very low price for corn, very disheartening for farmers down there. This was a horrible week for them with pricing because we already had low prices, and then they got over the last 2 weeks, I believe the exchange rate's gone from like 5.6 to like 5.2, and that drop has just absolutely dropped the bottom out of markets. That being said, a lot of times big crops are bad prices, and this farmer in particular, they're on the smaller side producer, but he's a friend. He farms not too far from Paraguay in the state of Paraná. We were down there. He also works. He farms with his family. He also works down there at a bank, and so he was thrilled with their yields. I think it's going to be record-setting yields for them, and it's a little picture of his harvest. So a lot going on, a lot to cover. I do think there could be bullish stories, both from the exchange rate side as far as from the weather side, but those are just stories that are starting to shape up a little bit and get a little bit of clarity. If you do want more help knowing how to navigate markets and make the decisions to really move your grain marketing forward, don't hesitate to reach out. Just shoot me an email. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Catch you next week.